Welcome into the official. We've got a great show for you this week. You'll notice I'm wearing the same shirt as I was last week. That's because we did record 2 in a row, but still going to give you some great information. Kind of an evergreen show this week, talking about non-traditional recruiting states. So a lot of times we do kind of mention, you'll hear us if you follow along with the official, you'll notice we say things like, oh, he's a 3-star from Texas, which means, it's a pretty good bet, or he's from California, whatever. But there's a lot of guys that do come from, not your typical Texas, Florida, Georgia, California states. And that's what we're going to center in on today and have a little discussion about, why this matters or how much it matters, to what extent, and also talk about a few players in particular. So without further ado, this is The Official. All right, gents, here we go. Everyone's in the house tonight for another good discussion, and I'm excited to talk about, this was actually an idea, I think, birthed out of ChatGPT, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, I didn't think we were gonna bring that up, but yes, it was. I just was looking for some show ideas, and I just asked it, and it gave us a few pretty good ones.
Yeah, I think that was when the whole Chat GPT really, earlier in the year, everyone was talking about it all the time. And, we plugged it in. What are some good ideas? And this one was one we always liked. We just wanted to kind of save it for when we could research it enough and have some thoughts about it. But the whole point here is talking about recruiting and players that come from your non-traditional recruiting hotbeds. And before we get started, I do want to mention homefieldapparel.com, of course. This is our partner for really the best collegiate apparel you're going to find. Anyone from St. Peter's, who made that Final Four run a few years, or Elite Eight, I think, or maybe Sweet 16. I don't know. It was a big, unprecedented run for a school like St. Peter's. They have those types of merch all the way to your Georgias, your Alabamas, and your Ohio States, everywhere in between. So check out homefieldapparel.com for vintage-inspired, really clean, really comfortable shirts, pants, sweatpants, hoodies, hats, the whole thing, college apparel. And if you put in Campus to Canton as your initial code, if you've never purchased from them before, you can get 15% off with our promo code there. So for sure, check out Homefield Apparel. And then also check out campus2canton.com, our parent website, where we just dropped a few weeks ago our top rankings so we talk about recruiting all year long, but we really didn't have our actual rankings with grades, composite grades from all of our evaluators on the site, but now we do, so you can check those out. And then you have subscription packages starting at $2.99 per month over at campus2canton.com for all your fantasy football needs, whether it's college, redraft, all the way up until C2C and NFL Dynasty. All right, so with that mouthful out of the way, let's just talk about briefly here in the beginning, how do you feel when you look at a guy, you're looking at his tape and you're enjoying what you're seeing, and then you're like, oh, he plays for like Nothingville Central in Ohio. Does that immediately make your heart sink? You're like, man, I'm really questioning if he's really that good now, when he's coming from a middle of nowhere in a non-traditional state outside of the Southeast, not Texas, not California type thing.
I don't really care. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. Obviously, if he's playing such small level of ball, I need to see high in production. I need to see translatable, athletic metrics to, just know that he can at least, hang in at the next level. But most of the time, I'm not really too worried unless they don't hit either of those marks. But to get on the radar in the first place, a lot of times they do.
So we talk about strength of schedule, and so that's baked in, but that's applicable whether it's, Indiana or Texas even. I mean, we look at strength of schedule and that's just built in. That's not necessarily because of where you're from. You can have, we've talked before about, oh, it's actually good at competition in Ohio or bad competition in California. So that kind of level sets a little bit. How about you, David? I mean, is there anything going on there, or are you kind of agnostic when it comes to location or where a player's from?
I mean, I agree with Matt saying. I do. I'm not gonna lie; it does make me a little bit nervous. Like a lot of these guys aren't like necessarily battle tested. A lot of the plays you kind of wonder if they're gonna translate. Um, I think even with like, especially with like the guys that have like a negative strength of schedule, which is like really really low. The hit rate for those guys is not very promising. Like I can speak on QBs because I was going through the database has like 600 or so quarterbacks. Granted, there's not a lot of negative strength of schedules in general. The sample size is probably pretty small, but
Hmm.
like the only guy that really hit from that is like Josh Allen. He had like a negative 12 SOS in some small town in California. Um, so like everything about Josh Allen is just a total outlier. Like he was like a sub 9 YPA, which is like another thing to look at with guys that hit in the NFL. It's just everything about him is weird, but he made it work. So it does make me nervous to answer your question.
Yeah, and I think it's reasonable. One thing I would say is I don't necessarily rule a guy out if I'm looking at tape and then see he's from Iowa or something like that. It's not like an immediate rule out, but I will say I kind of use the typical hotbeds as a little bit of a rule in, especially when I'm looking at, trying to mine through all the 3 stars. When we do our 3-star show, or I'm trying to specifically pick out sleepers, I just go to like Texas and Florida first, especially for the skill positions, wide receiver and running back. I mean, I don't necessarily care nearly as much for quarterback or tight end for that matter, but I think it's probably just a numbers game when we really get down to it. There's just so many more players in those states. They do those states, and the kind of the youth prep program do put a lot more resources into it. So like there's a training thing, there's year-round ability to play, all that kind of stuff. But with travel football and 7-on-7, guys can do it no matter where they are. But I do look for, like, I'll probably never really find a 3-star out of like Colorado out of nowhere unless you guys might bring him to me, because I'm skipping over those guys, and I'm just going to try to take from a subset that's like Texas, California, Florida when I'm looking at all those 3-stars. And I did do a very unscientific study, but when I looked at 3-star hit rates at some point over the last 2 years, the vast majority were actually from the state of Florida. Again, could be a numbers game. There's just more of them out there, but they go other places. They don't stay in state. So like guys that came, I mean, Antonio Brown was from Miami, but went to Central Michigan. I mean, these guys do kind of end up going out of state because the main state programs are full. And you can have gems that hit out of the state of Texas and state of Florida that wind up at, Northeastern schools or, Midwestern schools. So my eyebrow does raise. I know we're talking about the non-traditional, but just to kind of put in context why I do value these guys who are from Florida or Texas, because they pop and they pop in other places, not staying home for school. But this show is about, the non-traditional. Do you think that playing in cold weather, for instance, or just really rural, I mean, Idaho, Montana, Gatlin Blair's Bears, very high rated guy from Idaho this year. We liked Keinholz. He was from one of the Dakotas last year, quarterback. So you do find these one-off guys, and we look at their competition and we're not always super impressed. So I guess the question would be, I'll throw it to Matt first. What do you need to look for to like overcome that poor SOS, for instance? I mean, if you've got a guy playing South Dakota football, what do you need to see to really overcome that? The stats look good, but is there anything on film you're like, I need really pop or something like that?
Well, yeah, I would just say film wise, they just need to look like they're just absolutely crushing the competition. If you're out there playing against guys like under 10 SOS, then that's like pretty bottom barrel competition. If you're not looking good against these guys, then there's very, very unlikely you're gonna look good next level unless you take some sort of massive advancement in your game. So we can get into position specifics, but I would say just in general, I just need to see them absolutely dominating that competition.
Yeah, and stats are one thing, but you want to see physical, like you want to see him look way quicker than everyone else,
Because
way bigger than everyone
even
else.
at lower levels, guys can get schemed into stats too.
Yeah.
So
I think that's fair to say. I think so. We can't, and if you honestly go on Max Preps or something and just sort by the biggest stat leaders, a lot of times you'll find guys, especially receivers out in like Utah. I mean, they're putting up like 2,000-yard seasons. They don't even have an offer because I think they just run some wide open schemes out there and things like that. So stats don't get you all the way there. You need to see it. And I like that. You want to just see basically a guy who's just completely outperforming everyone in every possible way. Now, David, I want to get to you. You mentioned before the show you have a little theory that you're working on. Last time you really brought a theory to us. I loved it. It was the rushing quarterback theory. We've kind of carried that for the last few years. We got another theory on quarterbacks here about guys from Hawaii. So take it away. Tell us what you're working on. And when you bring up the one we have a clip of, I'll play that as well.
Yeah, I mean, this one's kind of in the works. I just started it this morning, but
fresh off the press.
Was just trying to think of something interesting to say on the podcast. But I was going down some rabbit holes trying to find something. And I stumbled upon Hawaii. I just started looking at Hawaii prospects, and I started looking at the quarterbacks. I was just kind of curious to see what quarterbacks came from Hawaii in general. And I guess the OG one that everyone kind of knows is Timmy Chang from way back in 2000, current head coach of Hawaii right now. But then I was like, what else have they produced? So then I just went through it, and I'm like, I went through 24/7's Hawaii, all their prospects listed from Hawaii, and from 2000 all the way up to 2011, and there was only 2 quarterbacks total. None of them did anything, so they just didn't have anything at all. I'm like, all right, that's kind of curious. So then 2011 is Marcus Mariota. And so Marcus Mariota goes on, obviously a high-profile prospect, goes to Oregon, wins the Heisman. And so I was thinking, Timmy Chang was before like social media and stuff like that, right? Like not everything's all televised. You can't see everything. Nothing. It's before Twitter and Facebook, all this stuff. So I was thinking potentially maybe Mariota just maybe put a lot of interest into with football in Hawaii. So then I started going through the list, and it started in 2016 where I just see all these quarterbacks popping up from Hawaii. So the first one that came up was Mackenzie Milton, 2016, and he actually started, I think, as a freshman at UCF. Was like QB3 in 2017. Yeah, he's just been really productive. And then after that, 2007, you obviously have Tua Tagovailoa. And then after that, you got his brother Talia. Then you got Dylan Gabriel, and then you got Jaden Delora. And so I was just thinking, all right, well, like there's this huge gap where there's no QBs at all, and then all of a sudden you got this, they're just popping up all over the place. So I just thought, I mean, it could just be like they all of a sudden have really good youth quarterback programs or something like that. But I thought maybe partially it had something to do with like kids being inspired by watching Marcus Mariota, to go on and be so successful. So then just leads to this class. I'll just touch on it. We already talked about Micah Alahado, but he's another guy, Hawaii born. He doesn't play in Hawaii. So the assistant coach for Bishop Gorman is from Hawaii. So they have a huge pipeline where they take kids over from there. They actually had a receiver last year that went to Wisconsin, and they have a running back, Micah Kapana, who's going to Michigan. This also another Hawaiian. So they're actually producing a decent amount of skill players. So I don't know. My theory was basically that maybe Marcus Mariota just inspired a bunch of kids to be quarterbacks, and all of a sudden they're producing. And by the way, like Hawaii is like 40th out of 50 states in like population. It's actually pretty small, and like it's right next to like New Hampshire, Maine, and Montana. So it just seemed like it just seemed like a lot of hits in a not a densely populated area.
Yeah, Very interesting stuff. I mean, I'll be honest, when you brought that up earlier today in the Slack, I was like, realize that, maybe it is Mariota, Tua, Dylan Gabriel. I mean, these guys who came in and were really good pretty quickly. I look at Hawaii quarterbacks a little bit, especially the 3 stars. I mean, I'm kind of interested. Alejandro is a very interesting looking guy. His stature might prevent a little bit of upside, but he looks really explosive as an athlete. I mean, who knows? Like, maybe it was Mariota. Maybe it's just more coverage. Maybe colleges can easily more get information on these guys way out in Hawaii and be able to get game tape easier and things like that. Like you said, with the advent of technology and social media. So it could be just coverage. These guys maybe weren't discovered before. But it's certainly interesting. And I agree with you that, the kind of that density of good players coming out of a very, like, you can't even name that many good players out of some of those other states you mentioned, Montana and Rhode Island and Connecticut, over the same amount of time. Like, you just listed 6 quarterbacks in one position. And so I think it's actually pretty interesting to follow along. Definitely a non-traditional state, but I find myself looking a little bit at Hawaii as well, just to see if there's any guys who catch my eye, especially at quarterback. So I've done the same thing. Matt, anything to add about the Hawaii quarterback theory?
No, not really. I think David covered it. I mean, I love Alejandro in this class. I think I'd probably be the highest person on him. So
there you go. Yeah, and he's going back home, right? He's going to Hawaii. Yeah. So we'll
play
see.
For Timmy Chang.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I'd love to see him do well, and that could be really exciting. So, we're about halfway point here. I think we can switch gears a little bit to talk about some specific players. That's what we always like to do here on The Official. And we've taken, kind of hand-selected 2 or 3 guys each to talk about from a non-traditional state, guys who we kind of like in this class and we think could do something, and then also even have some international guys, because that's becoming a bigger thing too. There's a lot of buzz and momentum with international imports coming into play college ball. Even at big name schools. Like, this isn't just for G5 anymore. You've got guys coming to like major universities to play football that grew up in Europe or other areas. So let's just kick it off here. Darian Dupree, David, take it away with him and why you like this guy.
Yeah, so he's a little bit under the radar, I feel like, because he missed a lot of last year where he played through turf toe and a hamstring injury. But I thought he was a really crafty, pretty good contact balance, decent speed. But I thought he was like the most natural pass catcher in the class, or near the top at least. And so that interested me. He's headed to Wisconsin. I don't know if by the way, these kids, the way they order some of these highlights, just like, I don't know if we'll really get to see much of him showing out here. But regardless, he just was recently offered by Alabama, so it's probably non-committal. I assume it's non-committal, but at least he's on their radar. They're somewhat interested. But I actually kind of like the landing spot with the Phil Longo offense, because everyone kind of talks about how, the box won't be stacked. They kind of spread things out, and running backs in his system are generally really efficient and used quite a bit in the passing game as well. I guess the hope was that he'd be like kind of a Michael Carter, Ty Chandler type guy or something like that. So I guess that's the hope. But from Illinois, I don't know if I mentioned that, which, the Chicago area is obviously a densely populated area, so there's going to be a decent amount of guys coming out of Illinois.
Yeah, and I feel like Wisconsin does get in there. I know they got Kyan Barry Johnson's from there. I think Wisconsin is, obviously about 2 hours from Chicago, so that is a big pipeline for them and needs to be probably to get some good athletes out of that Chicagoland area. But I think you hit it on the head. And that offense, you are looking at, your ideal would be a Ty Chandler, Michael Carter type. So if he turns out there in that offense, I think that could be real good, especially for CFF, no doubt. All right, Matt, Luke Reynolds, take us through this guy. I think he had a pretty big summer, actually, got his name up on the board and some radars.
Yeah, definitely. around the Elite 11, he had a really good showing out there. Just being one of the more consistent receivers in general. And right now he plays a lot of quarterback, mostly running the ball, but he's a really really good athlete. He's definitely got some dog in him. You can see here, really good with the ball in his hands. Super fluid guy. And going to Penn State where they can develop tight ends. I don't exactly love the CFF upside with Frapplier there, ahead of him, but I think he definitely has draftable NFL upside. I think he'd definitely be at least a day 3 pick with his physical abilities. So he's definitely someone I'll be monitoring a bit.
And remind me where he's from.
Oh yes, sorry, I should have said that. From Connecticut, I believe he just transferred to play ball in Massachusetts. So
Okay.
either way, not
Penn State
super on
mining
the
that.
chart, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Rappley was from up in Massachusetts as well, maybe. So Penn State naturally digging into the Northeast over there. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. I'm taking a guy not quite as off the beaten path as Hawaii, but the smallest state in the union. Israel Geraldo is a guy I like from Rhode Island and uncommitted right now. Probably, I think crystal balled, or at least a lot of people seem to think he might wind up at Maryland. But look at the change of direction here. He is a very special mover, smaller guy, probably a slot type, but definitely shows like what Matt was saying. When you're playing Rhode Island high school competition, you want a dude who just looks completely different. And he kind of looks a little bit like Nightcrawler out there, just almost morphing from spot to spot. Nobody can get a hand on him. And he is small, but like he gets in that crouch position, like he really does. He's just kind of like zipping around and no one can get a hand on him. So I think he could be very fun at the next level and elevating right there, showing some ball skills to get over a DB. So I kind of like Israel Geraldo. He's going to be, in your drafts, we're talking last round pick probably, or at least maybe a waiver wire watch type. But interesting player from the smallest state in the Union, Rhode Island. You don't get to say that very often. Kicking it over to you, David. Corey Duff, another guy from an untraditional state, but we kind of like him, I guess, huh?
Yeah, he's from New York. Another guy, I think a 20 SOS, which is below average. I thought he was super fluid, really good ball skills. He had a really big summer playing 7v7. I don't know if he has a really high athlete score or whatever, but he looks pretty athletic on film to me at least. I actually thought he was kind of like an Aronde Gadsden type to me, but he's a tweener for sure. So it's like, as far as NFL goes, it's always kind of a weird thing with that guy. Like he's like 6'5", 200. Not exactly expecting him to put on like 45 pounds or whatever. So I think he'll be, I think he'll be a college guy. And yeah, he's going to Rutgers. You kind of need, what's his name? A Johnny Shepherd to be pretty good.
Yeah.
To be productive, but I like his game in a vacuum.
Yeah, and he looks really long. I mean, those arms, he was catching some passes, and just like the wingspan looks pretty huge for him. So maybe he can pack on more pounds than you'd think. I did like him running what I appeared to be running over a pitcher's mound on the way to the end zone on one of those fields up in New York. Maybe that's why they don't have the best prospects, because they're sharing baseball diamonds. All right, Matt, I'm really excited to talk about the next two guys for you. International prospects. So this is something we've kind of chatted about a little bit in the Slack. Like, hey, we need to keep an eye on this. I'd love to see this get a little bit more mainstream. And for a while, it was like, some guy maybe would go to like Akron or Bowling Green, and you'd be like, oh, he was born in Germany. But I feel like this is becoming a lot more mainstream. So tell us about Oliver Lundberg Coleman. And I think he's not going to a major school, but still, you like him.
Oh yeah, he's actually going to UConn. So not awful, actually a pretty decent CFF landing spot, I would say. He is out of Sweden. He was 5'9", 200 pounds, 3 FBS offers. And first one was from Western Kentucky. He went to a camp there. They didn't even know he was Swedish, and they offered him. He immediately committed, and then later on he ended up decommitting from there. That just didn't end up working out, but that's fine. I must prefer UConn anyway. and he goes and plays at Rig Academy, RIG Academy. It's basically the IMG over there,
Hmm.
where they go to school strictly to play American football, and they learn about football in classes. They learn about nutrition and a bunch of other stuff. So it's interesting, at least. And I like his tape. I mean, he moves pretty good. Good lateral mover, good size. I think he could potentially be something at UConn. But, probably not a guy we're drafting in leagues. Definitely a wait and
No,
see.
yeah, I mean, the whole point of this show was not necessarily always actionable information, but an interesting angle on non-traditional type stuff and guys to certainly put on your radar. And so I know I've heard about this Oliver Lundberg guy actually for a while. I think he's been an
Yeah,
international
he
guy
was
who's
supposed to be the international guys. It's hard to tell whether they're going to be in one class or the other. He was
yeah.
originally supposed to be in 2023. Now he's in the 2024 class.
Okay.
And same
Maybe
with the
that's why
next
I'd
guy
heard
we're
about
talking
him for a little
about.
bit. Okay, so a guy that, depending on where he winds up on my list, might be actually draftable in freshman drafts is Gavin Hoffman, a tight end prospect out of Kansas who is committed to Iowa. So you love that. Tight ends going to Iowa, you're already halfway to the NFL. But, he's kind of my Rappelier of this class. You probably heard me talk about him a few times by now. But one of the few tight ends in this class who actually has some inline and film, has some blocking on film, but also he's a pretty freak athlete. And then, can do things like this, lined up outside, make a guy miss on the sideline, and then keep going. So I do like him. And he is, again, from Kansas, and, kind of a bummer. I like what they're building at Kansas State. It would have been fun for him to go to Kansas State, but, Iowa is great also. All right, so kicking it to David for the last round here. Joseph McVeigh, where is he from, and why do you like him? Boom. All right, we got dunks.
Yeah, dunks. That's it. No, he's from Arkansas, so he might play. He might play the. Well, I guess the Sweden takes the cake on that one. But as far as U.S. competition, might be the worst. He has a negative 15 SOS. He's played against. Yeah, it's just bad. But I thought his movement was high level. Like he kind of has some of the nitro tuggle to him, maybe not to his level, but like his lateral displacement is pretty crazy. He's just really, he's got curve linear, acceleration, stuff like that. So he's just a super athlete. Had like 110 catches last year, like over 1,500 yards, over 20 touchdowns. He already posted his week 1 highlights, and it's a debacle. I have no idea what his stats were. He must have had 200 plus yards and like 5 touchdowns or something. It's too easy for him, which is concerning. You wonder how he's going to translate when he starts playing in the SEC, but going to Vanderbilt. But I think he's interesting. I'm rooting for him. I'll put it that way.
We do love Vandy recruits. I mean, but I think that it is concerning that the SOS is so bad. But what's not concerning is that he just looks like he's on a completely different playing field as these guys, like Matt was alluding to earlier, when they just pop so much on film. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe it is bad competition, but he's doing all you can possibly do against that type of competition. And then to round it all out here, we'll go Duncan Brune for you, Matt, another international guy. So that's kind of fun to talk about. So tell us about him. I don't think I know this name, actually.
Yeah, so Duncan Brune, he is out of Germany. He's one of the better athletes in the class, actually. 81st percentile athleticism score in our database. He has great 100-meter times. He has good vertical jump, 40-yard time, like a bunch of really impressive workout numbers. You can definitely see that on tape here. He just moves super well. He's the son of a 4-time Olympic German swimmer, so he definitely has the bloodlines in there too. He works out at the national German bobsledding team. So a very athletic guy. He currently has 3 FBS offers from Middle Tennessee, Ohio, and Toledo. And he's 5'10", 195 pounds, so definitely the requisite size too. Just could be somebody fun to keep your eye on. Maybe he does something.
Yeah, he plays for the Cologne Crocodiles, so you got to love that. But yeah, if he wound up like in the MAC, I know you're saying, maybe I'm looking here on some offers. It looks like maybe Toledo, Ohio, Middle Tennessee. Yeah, you never know for CFF. If you hear that name pop up at some time in the next few years, just remember it. And in the MAC, who knows? We love investing in the MAC for CFF. All right. Well, I mean, I think that's all the names we wanted to get to. Thanks for digging through all those guys from all those states. Thank you, David, for working on the Hawaii quarterback theorem. I think it's something worth looking into even deeper. But that was really fun looking at some, just getting out of the states of Texas. I feel like I know I spend so much time in Texas and Florida doing this, but, pretty fun. And occasionally you do get that guy out of somewhere else. And, maybe we highlighted a future star here. So that would be great. But as always, gentlemen, thank you so much for all your hard work. This has been The Official.